of our guest today is Engineer Aminat Yahuza. Engineer Aminat, you can go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Engineer Aminat Yahuza. I'm reporting from Kaduna. I beg to stand on established protocols. Engineer Umar Gambo Jibrin, FNSE OON. Engineer Umar Gambo is the Executive Secretary, Federal Capital Development Authority, FCDA, Abuja, a position to which he was appointed in 2017 by the Nigerian President, Muhammadu Buhari. As Executive Secretary, he is essentially the Chief Executive Officer of the FCDA, a parastatal charged with the development of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT. Prior to his appointment as the Executive Secretary, Engineer UG Jibrin was Director, Mass Housing, PPP at the FCDE. He assumed that position in 2008 as its pioneer director and steered the affairs of the department for 9 years, making the FCT Abuja one of the fastest growing cities in Africa in terms of housing and infrastructural development. He joined the FCDA in July 1985 and supervised major capital projects like the Mektama District Infrastructure Project and various water projects in the FCT. Engineer Jibrin is a chartered engineer registered with OON. He served as Chief Inspector, OON Engineering Regulatory Monitoring Unit, Abuja Zone. He is also a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers and an active leader of the society. He was chairman of Abuja branch of Nigerian Society of Engineers in 2003 to 2005. He also served as a member of the FNSE branch of trustees. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering, water resources and environmental engineering from the prestigious Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. Engineer Jibrin is a recipient of many awards, including the Distinguished National Award for Officer of the Order of the Niger, OON. Engineer Jibrin, we are truly honored to have you here, sir. Please, you may have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Can I go on?
Yes, sir.
Once again, I want to start by thanking the President OON for giving me the opportunity to speak today. All other members of OON, for which I also belong, I want to thank you for this opportunity, the body of engineering. I want to start by mentioning that the normal claim, or is it the assertion, that housing deficit in Nigeria is 17 million plus. We don't have the figures that can tell us where we are, but we know for a while that it's been 17 million plus. So all effort has been done to make sure that this is taken down. That's what led the administration of the Federal Capital Territory in putting up the mass housing scheme, or rather streamlining it from 2007-08 to ensure that the program achieves success and multiplies exponentially. Next slide, please. Next slide. The outline is, as you see it on the screen, overview of the PPP, where we would look at the essentials, what is needed for PPPs to excel, the PPP project cycle, and the need for this partnership. We're aligning the heading with the public-private partnership because essentially mass housing itself is basically a PPP project. Then the housing delivery, why we need affordable housing, the overview of the housing program in the FCT, the guideline, challenges, and recommendations and conclusions. Next slide. We all know it that every developing country, such as ours, as we say, the rate and the pressure on government to provide housing and infrastructure facilities to the inhabitants is very, very enormous, as captured by the author. The factors responsible are very, very far-reaching, ranging from the challenging financing sources, technical capacity, the public sector. However, it is adequate and right to assert that housing should be safe, secure, healthy, and should be available in its affordable state. That's the requirement by the Habitat UN Global Agency. Next slide. It is known that various collaborative efforts have to be done, and that's why we say the PPP is the most promising form of collaboration. PPPs describe the spectrum of possible relationships between public and private sectors for provision of infrastructure and services, and it's a widely accepted framework for resolving needs and demand gap for provision of shelter. Same UN Habitat. Next. Of course, because of that, the FCT and the country at large resorted to aligning with the concept of the public-private partnerships, such that the organized private sector was identified by the administration of the Federal Capital Territory to be the one to develop the housing units along with the tertiary infrastructure, while the administration, and in this case the FCDA, will provide the primary infrastructure to these areas for the housing developers to connect for the usage of the various house owners. To that effect, a guideline was developed and it was approved by the Federal Executive Council for all developers intending to put up mass housing in the Federal Capital Territory. Next slide. We look at this PPP in the first instance. Let's look at the overview. As you know, a PPP is a contractual agreement between public agency and private entity, and it's normally lasting a medium to long term periods of maybe 5 to 30 years for developing the infrastructure or delivering services. PPP builds on the expertise of both the public and private partners to best meet clearly defined public needs. The goal of PPP is to combine the best capabilities of the public and private sector for ultimate benefit in service delivery. It is also known that when a PPP is implemented, packaged and implemented, it accelerates provision of services and eliminates challenges associated with the traditional procurement process, where government usually struggles to raise funds for infrastructure provision. Some of the key essentials of PPPs includes political leadership and commitment. Very, very important. If you don't have the political wherewithal, then PPP are not likely to flourish. The framework is equally very important, where you itemize all the risks that are associated with the project or programs, so that you will be able to apportion to the best party to handle each. Then there must be a stakeholder consultation for PPPs to survive or to thrive. Public sector experience and expertise to manage the PPP process through adequate training and capacity building is also important. Overall, there must be a strong enabling environment for PPPs to strive. I think what do we need for PPPs to excel? As I said, we must have a comprehensive institutional and regulatory framework. We have the assurance of financial compatibility, the robustness of transactions, fiscal issues, do we require waivers or not, and other related issues that will stimulate the investment, and then the need for a reference location where such programs will be executed and monitored, such as the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, which is now the main body that is overlooking PPP issues in Nigeria. So the coming of ICRC certainly has given the PPP a base and a foundation, such that we have aligned ourselves as a nation. And of course, in the territory, we envisaged this and we started much early, even prior to the coming of the ICRC. Next slide. According to the ICRC guidelines, a prospective PPP project is processed through these 4 basic stages: project identification, project prioritization, and selection. Then you have the development phase, where you do the need analysis. What are the economic assessment needed, the options for appraising value for money and other parameters. Then the procurement phase, and then the implementation phase. Equally, the generic structure can be taken as is on this board. We have the public sector body for whom an agreement will be done with any private party, usually a special purpose vehicle. And then you have the contributors in terms of who will offer from the private sector in the whole shareholding and then the loan agreements. And then you have the subcontractors who do the construction and or operation and maintenance. Those are the critical parties that convene and remain the basic structure for public-private partnerships. Why do we need PPPs? Government budgetary constraints are usually known to every person, not only in the FCT, not in Nigeria, not even in South Africa, but sub-Saharan Africa, but in the world at large. Governments are the most incompetent to do projects or PPP projects alone. They must look for partners because usually they don't have the funds adequate enough for them to do it. In that case, it also helps to free up government's funds. Like I said, it's inadequate in government systems. So if you have a partner that is funding, then you are likely to free your money to do some other things with it. PPP, you need it also for you to renew, apart from providing for fresh facilities in terms of infrastructure and social services, or make drastic improvements on the one that is on ground. Mass housing delivery. Housing is the provision of functional shelter in a proper setting within a neighborhood, supported by substantial maintenance of the built environment for the day-to-day living and activities of individuals and families. It also refers to the provision of housing built in large numbers and quantity in a particular location. According to the report of the Nigerian Presidential Committee on Urban Development and Housing in the year 2000, mass housing is defined as the process of providing large number of residential buildings on a permanent basis with adequate physical infrastructure and social services in a planned, decent, safe, and sanitary neighborhood to meet the basic and special needs of the population. This is very, very important because we are not talking of just putting houses without the requisite infrastructure and facilities. So the provision of infrastructure and services for the dwellers of all housing units in the mass housing program is very, very critical. That's what brings the compatibility with the general PPP concept. Otherwise, if we do it in the context of Nigeria, you have only the housing and no commensurate infrastructure, which will still leave us where we have been as in the past. Of course, the need for affordable housing is as a result of the rapid growth in our population, which creates the usual pressure for shelter and the needed supporting facilities. As you know, Nigeria is the fastest urbanizing country in the African continent. And one of the most important challenges facing the country is the provision of affordable housing. The Federal Capital Territory is, of course, not left out of the hub. So, looking at the next slide, government in most developing countries, like I said, they face the challenge to meet this growing demand for new and better housing with the infrastructure and services for its citizens. Available funding from the local sources and capacity in the public sector to implement many projects at one time remains limited, as government funds found that partnership with the private sector is an attractive alternative to increase and improve the supply of both the infrastructure and the housing units. As you know, the public sector is known and is always taken as responsible for the provision of housing for the majority of the citizens. So whatever investment opportunities that will help in ameliorating and expanding the housing stock is usually sought after. The inability of government to provide infrastructure and deliver housing services affects the promotion of business and expansion of communities. And as a result, governments in several countries have been increasingly engaging the private sector in the provision of these required services through the PPP window. The Federal Capital Territory Housing Program Overview. The FCT is acclaimed to be one of the fastest growing cities in Africa in terms of housing and infrastructure. However, it became necessary for the government to make available adequate houses for the increasing population as a result of the influx into the city. The master plan of Abuja has made every arrangement to cater for the different subgroups in terms of the hierarchy of the different phases in the development sequence of the city and the territory. But because of the upsurge in population as a result of so many issues, one basic one being the issue of insecurity around the other parts of the country, Abuja became the destination domain for all Nigerians. And this, the master plan never envisaged would be the case. In fact, Abuja master plan had envisaged that as development is going on in the city, concurrently about 4 other locations, or 5 if you like, to make it in the 6 zones that we have in the country. One major city like Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, Port Harcourt, Enugu ought to have been taken along so that it will relieve the pressure that was anticipated, but these were not fully taken to the letter. And then with the coming of the insecurity, the entire influx now descended on Abuja alone. And that's what is really responsible for the death of both the infrastructure and the housing stock in the nation's federal capital city. And over the years too, the budget has been dwindling and has made it very difficult. And that led the administration to have no option than to revert or to look forward to the PPP window to be able to improve both in terms of infrastructure and then the housing stock. The administration, in creating these avenues for the realization of housing development objectives, agreed to make land available within the capital city and the satellite towns for housing development, while the government concentrates in putting the primary infrastructure. The developers, on the other hand, are required to develop housing along with the secondary and tertiary infrastructure in the areas earmarked for them to conform with the general standard specifications of the city. Every developer is responsible for putting up the roads, water supply, electricity, and other service requirements for all the households within his given piece of land, while the administration through the Federal Capital Development Authority will give similar primary facilities to those districts and areas where these investors have land for the housing provision. The houses, when fully developed, are to be sold to interested citizens by the developers, who are to forward the names of the off-takers for issuance of appropriate land titles by the administration, which means every developer in the Federal Capital Territory for housing development, mass housing specifically, has no title over any land, but rather has a letter of intent with a lease agreement with the administration, which has a timeline within which we develop. It can be extended, but if there is dispute in the clauses of the agreement, the entire project reverts back to the administration for completion and utilization by citizens. I think this one is just talking of some historical perspectives. Next. This one is showing the locations where there are allocations within the districts in the FCT for mass housing development. They are shaded in red, over 30 districts where we have these mass housing developments ongoing. Prior to this, next, the Federal Housing Authority, the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing were able to put housing within the FCT in Gwarimpa, Lugbe, Karungadua, and Kado districts. This is what has been the position which the FCT administration complemented with the mass housing development. The aim of the FCT mass housing is to make available functional and affordable housings. Like we said earlier, specifically to lower the housing deficit in the city, in the territory, and the city in particular, and to bring down the costs for the housing and rent, and to also reduce some of the slums that are existing in some parts of the territory. Of course, we have reviewed that the scheme is enjoying the window of the public-private partnerships to thrive. And then we have also mentioned how it is to be implemented, leading to off-takers getting their CFOs. Are we there? Next. Next. In order to achieve the above aim or objective, a department was established, like we said earlier, which is the mass housing and public-private partnership, because we envisage that mass housing alone ordinarily connotes PPP. So, but since we are not going to be dealing with mass housing alone, the department was also charged with the responsibility for doing all public-private partnership engagements for the FCDA and the administration at large. So the department at infancy developed policies and regulations for mass housing development, prepared manuals and standards for how the program should be implemented, establishing systems and procedures for the development of housing schemes within the framework of the policy by the organized private sector. Next, it established the methodology for engaging stakeholders through consultation with relevant FCTA and FCDA agencies, and also established benchmark for and checklists for all developers to satisfy prior to commencement of any mass housing development, as well as carry out additional functions as may be necessary for achieving the objective of the housing scheme in the territory. These are basically the functions of the department. Now the guidelines. Specifically, the federal government, in its effort to address housing challenge, carried out a very ambitious housing scheme on large scale with the ultimate target of boosting supply to particularly ameliorate the acute housing among the low income. I think this one is basically just mentioning when the guideline for the FCT mass housing development scheme was put in place and gazetted in 2009 using the PPP model. Next. I think we have said so much on this, talking of how the allottees get the land using since it's not a title straight to them, they get letters of intent, develop the land, sell out the houses, and then get the off-takers to be given their Cs of O's. Of course, they also, like I said earlier, are to sign lease agreements and undertaking to mobilize to site within 6 months to complete the development in 36 months after signing the agreement, complying with all the city's regulations, standards, and specifications for construction of the housing units. All legal and financial requirements that will qualify them for consideration are the ones that are given prominence. The legal is to make sure that they execute it according to the tenets of the agreement. And then they must indicate their financial capabilities to be able to deliver on the needed houses and the infrastructure. These are just some basic fees that are according to the lease agreement and the guidelines, the fees that are chargeable when an investor or a developer is given land, whether in the city or in the satellite areas. There is a difference between land in the federal capital city and then the one in the satellite areas in terms of the hierarchy of the infrastructure. If you have a land in the city, the requirements are more stringent, and that's why the figures, the fees are more, because in the satellite towns, the standards for the infrastructure are relaxed. You can have covered storm drains. You can have your electricity cables flying overhead, but in the city, everything is underground. We don't have any services that should remain above ground. If they do occur, they are there on a temporary basis. So that's what is responsible for the difference in terms of the fee and even the sizes of land for the city and the satellite areas. Next. This also describes the technical requirements for developers to satisfy before an agreement is signed between the developers and the authority. Basically, there are three requirements in terms of planning, in terms of building and architectural requirements, and then engineering. Let's move to the slide. Next. Next, okay. Even these are just the ranges of the roads that we have both in the FCC and then the satellite towns. These are the next slide. These are the range of the infrastructure that we require every developer to provide for the needs of the housing areas in both satellite towns and in the city. So next is challenges of the FCT Mass Housing Delivery Program. Number one is, despite the good and laudable intention of the mass housing scheme, a lot of challenges have affected it from inception, which in turn affects the delivery of the much needed housing in the territory. The issue of institutional, regulatory, and management challenges is very important. It requires that the institution must be ready and there to give teeth to all the issues that are enshrined for it to survive. Once these are missing, it means the program will continue to suffer. Of course, the administration has done its best to make sure that these are provided, because we have done all the requirements in terms of putting in place what would moderate the process. We have the issue of inadequacy of planning and supervision. Sometimes, because of the challenges in the arrangement of where these housing developments are put in place, we go through enormous difficulties, because some areas are ordinarily better off in terms of their ability to be prepared for housing delivery. And once in a while you have the planning system not making it easier, and we just thought maybe we should identify this as one of the challenges. Of course, as professionals, we try to make sure that where the difficulties are enormous, we look for other options so that the investors are not left to suffer in the delivery process. The issue of infrastructure is a very fundamental point. Ideally, the guideline suggests that you don't provide houses without the basic infrastructure. As we all know, in this city and the territory at large, the issue of having adequate infrastructure before commencing housing development is still with us, because the developers have found ways, to circumvent the process with all the collaboration between the stakeholder departments and agencies in the Federal Capital Territory. This remains a very major issue, because like we earlier said, infrastructure provision is very, very expensive. Government has limited resources. That's what brings the partnership in terms of PPPs to be able to overcome that. But even with that, we are still not out of the woods. In the mass housing delivery process for the FCT, developers are known to be parceling lands and selling to individuals instead of the known procedure for them to put the infrastructure, put the houses, and then sell to off-takers. In doing this, off-takers are left to build houses without any commensurate facilities, and it is against both the master plan arrangement and the guidelines for mass housing development in the city. We also have the issue of high cost of building materials. This one is a global issue, it's a national issue, and the FCT is not out of it in this regard. We always encourage and implore developers to source for housing delivery materials that can make the costs relatively low. There are so many discussions as to how this can be enhanced. And most times, investors, when they come up with proposals, we review it jointly using the committee of the SDAs to see which ones always will give the lower benchmark. And the issue of difficulties in accessing loans for housing delivery within the affordability bracket existence is also a very big challenge for the mass housing development in the FCT. Of course, despite the challenges of the FCT mass housing scheme, the FCT administration has recorded some achievement in housing delivery, which is anchored using this same PPP model. It is not anything to make too much of noise, because we still are far from realizing the dream. So we're looking up to all opportunities and avenues to be able to make improvements and avail the citizens the housing stock that we are desperately looking for in the Federal Capital Territory and the city in particular. Some clips of the estates or housing stock that we have in the city are shown in the almost 4, 5, 6, 7 slides. Go on, take it to the end of. Some are almost close to our requirements. Some are far from meeting the requirements, but because we have a robust monitoring system, we try to make sure that what is put on ground is done to a large extent in conformity with our master plan provisions. I don't need to be calling the names of the developers. So recommendations. Public-private partnership has been adopted by the FCT administration as a means of providing affordable housing for the citizens of Abuja. It is an attractive alternative in the supply of urban infrastructure, thus requires quality planning, regulation, monitoring, and adequate engagement with the private sector, as well as beneficiaries. It is a known fact that PPPs are a collaboration-dependent enterprise. You can never do it alone. So all parties that are expected to make it work must put their acts together, and that is what will ensure success in this enterprise. That's what that bullet is saying. There is need to assess the capacity of the private sector in order to determine their eligibility for involvement in FCT's mass housing programs. This will require strengthening of PPP programs and policies and the need for training of government officials. This also is a very important point that we feel must be mentioned to be able to achieve success. In conclusion, the Federal Capital Territory is acclaimed to be one of the fastest growing cities in Africa in terms of housing and infrastructure development. This one is just to underscore the fact that, yes, the city is still a construction site, and the best in the entire world must be brought to Abuja. However, housing development within the FCT has suffered setback due to financial challenges being faced by government. And this is primarily what led to the adoption of the public-private partnership policy by the government. And this is the most appropriate means of addressing housing issues and a right step in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. The Executive Secretary, FCDA, Engineer Umar Gambo Jibrin, FNSE OON. We appreciate your time, and the recommendations are exceptional. I don't know, sir, if you would like to take some questions or comments from participants.
Very much welcome.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. So if you are part of this meeting and you have a question or a comment, please use the raise hand feature, or you can put your comment in the chat box, and definitely we'll read it out for Engineer Jibrin to address it. Engineer Gerald, you want to say something?
Yeah, but I wanted if people have questions.
My president.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry to draw it back. Can I just take the opportunity to introduce two persons that have been sitting by me? One is Engineer Emmanuel Abiodun Oluwadamisi, FNSE. He is the current Director of Mass Housing and Public-Private Partnership in the FCDA. I'm sure for all APOEM and other engineers, you know, he is past chairman of the branch.
Yes.
And then I have QS Antonio DG, the Director of Public Buildings in the Federal Capital Development Authority. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I really would like to appreciate you, sir, for honoring this our invitation. We are extremely grateful and honored, I must say. I want to also appreciate those who have tuned in. Past President Ademola Olorunfemi is right here. We thank you, sir, for always joining us. And the idea to bring this up came because sometime back we had a workshop on public-private partnership, a seminar on public-private partnership taken by Engineer Sisi Kachi. And after that, we thought, he has taught us the theory, let us see a place where it is being really implemented. And that was how the EXCO decided that we should invite the pioneer director of the Abuja mass housing, knowing the success that scheme has recorded. And of course, we also know that there are challenges there. We're not unaware of that. And one of the questions that came to my mind as I was listening to you, sir, was that, do you think there's a way out for this parceling? You are talking about developers parceling the land. And I see that they'll be parceling the land because bank loans are really difficult to access. They are very unfriendly. The interest rate is really high. Meanwhile, you have given them a condition that they must finish building within 3 years, they must start within 6 months, and those things. So I would think that is the reason why they kind of don't have a choice. You know, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I would like you to tell us if there's a way out of this so that the model can actually be executed the way it was planned to be executed. That's my question, sir.
Can I respond?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think the simple thing I would say here is, of course, it is something that the administration see as a challenge, and it's something that should not be encouraged. But instead of parceling, what we do encourage them to do is to follow the sequence that will allow them to do the development in phases. Instead of thinking that, okay, I can only, get, if the loan facility is not going to be enough for you to develop the entire land area that has been given, like I said in the lecture, we have a sequence for you to develop. And the first is you have to get all the requisite approvals before you get the endorsement to start. Now, if you have, say, for example, a 20-hectare piece of land, and you have the design, final engineering design is there, you have gotten your approvals for your concept and building types and the infrastructure, you can segment this into areas where you decide to start with probably 20% of the land area, from where you can now progress, because you will certainly not be able to get the funds to do the secondary and tertiary infrastructure along with the buildings with loan facility that should be able to cover that area. So you have the choice to really do it in a phase. That's what we always advocate. And that's why our development effort, the government had no money to do all the infrastructure, not just in phases, but even within phases, we have it in districts and zones. So this is the kind of approach that we try to encourage developers. Other than that, I think it's just a mentality. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think Engineer Olorunfemi was raising his hand earlier.
Hello?
Yeah, you can go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my president, good morning, good morning. Good morning. Good morning, my brother and friend, UG. Nice seeing you after about 6 months. Looking as usual. So we're all fine. My colleague, it's for me an honor to join for so many reasons. But let me start by my apologies. I was in a meeting which I was chairing with not much, and I told him I have a meeting for 11. He told me he has one as well. What I saw was mass housing at UG. I didn't even see the appointment. I didn't know we were going to meet on the same platform. But unfortunately, I even went to click the ID meeting for Nigerian content and said, there to host. I picked photo. An appointment. I didn't expect less from UG, my own brother. I am telling for so many reasons. Education, enlightenment is not something that stops at any point, whether you do this or that or what have you. So, and Apple has been in the forefront of bringing issues that are of importance, can help us as individuals, professionals, and as a society. I want to congratulate Madam President. It has been in your transition. We're very proud of our point. Let me acknowledge again the support we got over the years. We as FNSE and individuals from Jibrin and from FCDA. I'm sure we will not forget that we have an 8.4 hectares land mass housing. And then by so many presidents, but I had the privilege to collect that certificate. We had to use all manners of records. Now usually had to organize for me to visit the minister and all of that. Because we eventually got it. I'm not too certain where we are on it, but we have that 8.4 something hectares. I think it's something we can do. I told the current president, I tried the current president was in a meeting. I'm sure he will drive into something that we can present. I want to congratulate that point. I want to thank you on a personal note and an official note again. I want to give you a pleasure in being here. In conclusion, please, I don't ever thank the president, president, for joining to honor me in the second Olorunfemi lecture. I knew I saw you. I mentioned I was going to call you thereafter. Thank you very much. Thank those who are here who also attended. Thank those who didn't attend, but they were praying for me. Thank those who are going to attend the next edition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, sir. Engineer Ademola Olorunfemi. I don't think there's any question from anyone. Upon President, can we proceed on this?
Okay, I don't know. I think Professor Fatai Anofi, are you trying to raise your hand? You need to unmute yourself, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me thank the president of Appoint for organizing this. As usual, you guys are always ahead of other divisions. I want to also use this opportunity to thank our executive secretary. The comment I have has to still do with that first comment, which is this issue of parceling. In as much as the developers may be cutting corners or violating certain rules regarding issue of parceling or making very high profit and all of that, or selling these lands, parceling these lands to individuals at a very exorbitant rate. Is it possible for the authority to look at the reality? The reality, as pointed out by our sister, that is actually the reality. A situation where even the government in providing the infrastructure is a challenge, even the primary ones. And the individual developer who was given this land, who were given this land, and were to develop, even if it is 20%, as you have said, my ES, it's not easy for them. Ab initio, they got this land from the authority by virtue of getting it developed, but they know right in them that it will not be that easy. So it's individual they could actually give these lands to. That is the reality. So, but what I'm trying to say is it possible for certain measure be taken, regulations in terms of control of maybe the prices or the amounts individuals collect from these parcels of land within the land given allocated to individual developer, vis-a-vis the amount he or she must have paid at the beginning to the administration. Is it possible to work out certain arrangements or regulations to control this? Actually, that's very point. I mean, that issue is a very important, and that's why many lands allocated to the private developers are not developed for a very long period of time. And you now have a number of uncompleted structures all over the place in the FCT. So, but meanwhile, individuals have capacity to build these houses if they allocated the land at reasonable amount and build it to taste, because this can be controlled, rather than individual the developer also building at using substandard because he wants to make profit, he wants to meet deadline. So he build at his own quality, so to say, because he's going to eventually sell them. So these are issues. So quality is an issue, time is an issue, finance is an issue. So these are all issues. So I was now thinking if the authority can actually come up with regulations to take care of all this along the line. Thank you.
Okay. Do I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for this very important point. Well, what I know is there is a lot that has been put in place to make sure that the land in the first place is not given to investors at very high prices. There's virtually, you can say, it's just a very, very, very token that is taken out of, you can imagine somebody taking 20 hectares of land. All he is asked to pay for the process to move on is not more than 10 million or thereabouts, you know. And it's not to say I pay for any land in that space, but we have had cost to, you know, assemble a substantial number of these investors to be able to look at the best ways that they were able to execute it with minimum challenges. We have tried to ensure that, like I said, land that is not seriously encumbered in terms of you know, its outlay for both the infrastructure development and the other requirements are made available. And then one big thing that will make it affordable for them or available for them to be able to develop is the primary infrastructure. So for the ones that have the primary infrastructure, we try to get them to do in the manner that I said, using the earlier response I gave, because it still remains one of the ways that we can be able to at least get them to develop as against doing the direct parceling and allowing people to just do it on themselves. However, what you have said is what another way we can go, and we have already commenced in that because we need the input of all parties in this. And I think as we go along, we are going to be looking at whatever measures and models that can come to help, you know, prevent these developers from making the parceling as the core objective than for them to do the real development in whatever way that will make it easily available for the citizens and allowing them to buy this land in a very, very expensive manner. In any case, mostly you rarely will be able to find someone that will agree that he has bought this land or that he is not the owner of the piece of land. So it's really something to continue to review and make efforts to see how we can address it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Engineer Chukwumakachi, can go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, all. Congratulate the ES for this wonderful lecture. Well, I'm not surprised because he's also a PPP expert by IP3. Actually, I wanted to, though he has said something about the parceling, I wanted to just chip in something that the reality on the ground avoided. It's just there everywhere. And in places I've been involved in consultancy, what I've done is to suggest to them to allow parceling, but limit it, circumscribe the parceling, put it in a jacket. For instance, the number of lands that can be parceled should be specified, the maximum number. Secondly, and most important, the certain infrastructure must be there before parceling will take place. As the ES itself accepted, it's very difficult to know when they are parceled. Because when they have sold, they tell the people, they will still have their office there, I mean the original developer. They tell the people working, if anybody comes to ask you a question, direct him to so-so place. So when you come and ask them, you'll be directed to the office. They'll say, yes, we are the people constructing that place. So to me, the best thing is to allow parceling, but limit it. That is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Engineer Valerie.
Oh, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I want to say thank you to the Executive Secretary for the lecture. Quite an interesting one. So all that has been done by the mass housing when it comes to monitoring and if we could actually be setting up an interdepartmental monitoring and evaluation team, because the monitoring and evaluation and the adherence to rules and approvals that seem to have been flaunted by most of these developers. So I'm just thinking and that there might be need that could also be to enforce some discipline in the approvals given to them for development. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello?
We can hear you very well.
We can hear you, sir.
Okay. I think let me start from my sister Valerie. Thank you for being part of this. As for monitoring committee, I think, like I did mention, right from onset, there is an interdepartmental committee of all relevant technical departments that are to look at this housing development program that are constituted minimum of a deputy director. In fact, we made it emphatic that we cannot take anyone less than a deputy director to be able to review all submissions by investors in mass housing development, so that it makes it a fast track kind of approach. We really have given it that prominence, and it doesn't suffer any approval delays in terms of mass housing at all. So it's part of the effort to make sure that developers are not left alone, so that we'll be able to deliver this housing stock in the timeline that the agreement specifies. My brother Sisi Kachi, thank you very much. Is my partner in the PPP environment. I congratulate you too for being part of today's effort. And I think what you said is really something to what you said, Engineer Ima Oluwadamisi, so maybe I should invite him to say something.
Thank you very much, sir, my Executive Secretary and the presenter. I also want to join my voice with the ES to thank everyone that is on board discussing the mass housing program. Now, coming to look at the issue of raised by Engineer Dr. Sisi Kachi, parceling the land and allowing developers to go, for me, might not be a very good way to go, in the sense that ab initio, before you are allowed or you are given land, there are some things you will have told the authority. You have the financial capacity, you have the technical capacity. So these are prerequisites for participating in the program. So if after giving you the land, you are not fulfilling your own part of the rule and say, okay, you cannot go and parcel or try to work with their terms. So these are some of the issues that I think that instead of allowing the developers to parcel and sell, we should rather encourage ourselves to be sincere when we are asking for partnership. PPP environment requires a lot of trust. It requires, a lot of sincerity. Every party must be sincere on the table. But where you are saying you have the financial and technical capacity, and then after giving you the land, you are not doing that, it's just synonymous with going contrary to what you have agreed. So I think it's an issue we should look at very well. And in the Department of Mass Housing, under the leadership of our ES, We are working very hard. We are going around to look at what they are doing. But honestly, the insincerity in the system is still a major challenge for us that we need to work on globally. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Don.
Thank you very much, sir. We have Engineer Amina Abdulmalik. Madam, you can unmute your mic. Well, sorry, I think the network on your side is very poor. You can put the comment or the question on the chat box and definitely we'll attend to it. Engineer Ben OC.
Hello?
Engineer Ben, you can go ahead, sir.
Okay. Good morning, my boss, the Executive Secretary of the Federal Capital Development Authority. And I want to commend also the President of APOEM for coming up with this wonderful comments to make regarding the presentation. One, my ears, sir. I want to make a passionate appeal. I don't know how possible that is. I have said that in different fora before. One was during the time the Director of Development Control came to present a lecture at the meeting of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. I did say that the Department of Development Control, I have said it before, should be domiciled under the Federal Capital Development Authority, so that there will be a kind of a proper coordination between that department and the Department of Development Control. Because sometimes you discover that most of the decisions they take, at the end of the day, they go contrary to what we have in the master plan of the FCT. I will implore the Executive Secretary to use his good offices to empower the Department of Mass Housing. Let the Department of Mass Housing be in charge. Let them be empowered to be in charge of the development of mass housing in the FCT. Let other development that has to do with other housing be left with the Department of Development Control, but statutorily, the mass housing, anything that has to do with mass housing should be under the control of the Department of Mass Housing, not just giving approval for the development, but also following the development till the completion. That is number one. Number two, I have also observed, many of us might also have observed this. When developers are given approval to go to construct to develop, what they normally do is this. You come, they have a prototype, approved prototype given to them for development. Then they will give the developers, the people who want to buy into the property, the option of remodeling the interior of that. If, for instance, there is a duplex, they give them the option to remodel the interior of the duplex without, touching the external part of it. That is deceitful, because at any point you alter any part of the interior arrangement, you have altered the structural arrangement or design of that structure, and they don't go back to redesign this structure to know if that rearrangement has altered the structure. I think the authorities should do something about this. If they want to do any alteration in the internal arrangement, that alteration must go back to the approving authority to give approval to check whether that alteration is inconsistent or in line with the approved structural design. If it has altered it, then it has to be redesigned and be resubmitted for approval. I think these are my two submissions. Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Engineer Ben O.C. Oko. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, my engineer, my vice chair.
Thank you, sir.
I think what you said with respect to the Department of Mass Housing being asked to take charge of everything mass housing. Well, I think currently that is what it is. But statutorily, the responsibility of development control still resides with development control. So like I said, what we started was to make sure that there is a departure. It's not everything of mass housing that will go direct to development control. It is rooted to the Department of Mass Housing, and it is treated centrally by that monitoring team that review the entire submission. I think for now, this is what we will continue to do until we are able to come up with the other part of what you said, making development control in its totality revert back to the FCTA. That is the ultimate intention, but until that happens, I think we'll try to make good what is on ground right now that still gives the developers the opportunity to have the entire process, reviewed and approved within the confines of the mass housing guidelines, using the technical group that are made up from all the respective departments, including the development control, planning, engineering, design, engineering services, and any other one that is relevant in the mix. You mentioned the other point, I actually forgotten. I think I've addressed the two issues you mentioned. I wanted to allow Naima to join you and respond, but I think I've done the two together. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Engineer Amina Abdulmalik earlier that had some network issue. I put a comment on, or the question rather, on the chat box, and our question is, what is the authority doing about developers that shortchanges beneficiaries? We also have another question from a participant named Tim. Have you had reasons to either cancel the partnership or take legal action against a private developer for defaulting? Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I think what my sister Amina said, developers shortchanging off-takers. I can't remember having a direct report by anybody, but whatever infringements that are happening within the mass housing sector, we do get information through so many channels. If you come directly and make a case, certainly that developer is invited and thorough investigation will be done on it. So if there is anybody that is aware of any developer that is in the practice of doing that, I think we're available for us to handle it appropriately using the various provisions that we have in the program and even our laws. Because I know there are quite a number of reports that keep coming, I would say on a daily basis, but routinely from off-takers as to their challenges with the developers and other people that try to, make life difficult in that environment. We all know who it is. The one on challenging developers for defaulting. Of course, like I said, in the mass housing guidelines, and then ultimately the agreement, the lease agreement that is signed between the parties in the mass housing arrangement, we have ways and means to deal with defaulters. And the ultimate punishment, if you like, is you can even lose the allocation. So depending on the infringement and the issue that is on ground, we look at it from the point of view of what is provided in the agreement, and it is dealt with in accordance with such provisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we're done with the questions and comments. So I'll call on the president of OON, Engineer Olola Ojela, the FNSE.
Engineer Shegun, thank you very much for taking us through this session so brilliantly once again. I would like once again to appreciate everyone who has come. I want to appreciate Lopworks, who has been sponsoring our platform, the Zoom platform. And I recognize also some people that I saw on the platform. The chairman of OVROP, Engineer Adekunle Adebaji, was here. I think he has left. Engineer Shegun Adedeji, the former registrar of Koren, was also online. And of course, the past presidents of OON were here. I saw the fourth OON president, Engineer Idi Atamusu, the ninth president of OON, Engineer Valerie Agberagba, and our founding member, who is always here, because she's the one managing this platform, Engineer Funlayo Kadri. I want to immensely thank you, sir, Engineer Jibrin. Someone asked me, how did you get such a big man to come and make a presentation? And I told them he's an OON member. That is how. And I'm serious about it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, sir. He's a man that I appreciate for his exceptional humility. He's high there, but if you even notice the way he was talking, each person that spoke, he has a way to say my sister, my brother, not because it's not politics. He knows them personally. He has a personal relationship with them. He's accessible. He's somebody you can walk up to and talk to, and he will listen to you. We are extremely grateful for having you. Of course, Engineer Sisi Kachi, you started this, or when you started us on the PPP training, and that was what gave birth to this. We want to also thank you for joining us today. And so on this, we would like to present you, sir, with our honor code certificates. Engineer Umar Gambo Jibrin, FNSE, OON, for an excellent presentation on the Abuja Mass Housing Project on this, our OON e-learning platform, today, the 12th of September, 2020. When I come to Abuja, I'm going to bring the hard copy of this to you personally, sir. And I want to thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, my sister. I really appreciate it. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Yes, and of course, another person here, his wife is an OON member who was talking, and that's Engineer Abdul Malik. Actually, he's the one that I would call the right-hand man of Engineer Jibrin. Every minute I will send him a text, please help me to tell Oga this, get me a CV, get me this, get me that. Engineer Abdul Malik is right here. He didn't use his video. I don't know why. And of course, Oga's team, Engineer Emmanuel Oluwadamisi, the present director of mass housing, and the rest of the team. I appreciate you all. I thank you extremely for what you have done to make this happen today. God bless you. Engineer Shegun, you want to close the meeting?
Thank you very much, ma'am. And thank you very much, everyone who have taken out their time to be a part of this e-learning session.
Just a minute.
Okay, go ahead,
I think some people want to know if they're going to have the slides, but I'm not sure how that is going to work. President, please.
Yeah, we will do what we normally do. We can give them the slide and we'll send the recording when it's ready.
And they can also access it on the OON YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you very much, sir, the Executive Secretary, FCDA. We appreciate your presence. All fellows in the house, members, thank you very much, and do have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
God bless you.